Have you ever wondered what invisible set of rules keeps a multi-billion-dollar company from going off the rails? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on corporate governance. It's the playbook that dictates how power really works inside the world's biggest corporations.
I mean, think about it. It's a huge question, right? When a company is bigger than the economy of some countries, who is actually in charge of making sure it plays fair? The answer, it turns out, is all about something called corporate governance.
To really get why these rules are so important, let's jump in a time machine and go back to the late 1990s in India. The economy was opening up to the world, which was exciting, but there was a big problem. A lot of the biggest companies were family-managed, and that meant decisions were often made behind closed doors, blurring the lines between what was good for the family and what was good for all the shareholders.
You see, global investors were knocking on the door, ready to pour money into the Indian market. But they needed to know their investment was safe. They needed a guarantee that companies were run with professional transparency, protecting everyone's money, not just the interests of the founding family. A whole new playbook was desperately needed. And that playbook arrived in 1998 thanks to the Confederation of Indian Industry, or the CII. They put out this voluntary code for good governance, led by the legendary industrialist Rahul Bajaj. And this one document, it would become the blueprint for pretty much all modern corporate governance in India. Now here's what made this code a total game changer. For the very first time in India, it officially defined the independent director. This wasn't just a title. It meant putting skilled, impartial outsiders in the boardroom whose one job was to ask tough questions and protect the interests of all the shareholders, not just the insiders. And we're not just talking about vague suggestions here. The code laid down hard numbers. It said that at least 30% of the board had to be independent if the chairman wasn't also the CEO. This wasn't just some random number. It was designed to create a real force of outside voices, strong enough to actually influence decisions and stop the board from becoming a rubber stamp.
The logic here is all about checks and balances. It's just common sense, really. When the chairman is also the managing director, that's a ton of power concentrated in one person. So to balance that out, the code demanded an even stronger independent voice, a full 50% majority on the board, to make sure there was real oversight.
This next rule was genius. It was aimed squarely at the trophy director. You know the type, a big, famous name that looks great on the letterhead, but who rarely contributes. By making boards meet at least 6 times a year, the code basically forced directors to be constantly engaged and actively involved in what the company was doing. And this one tackles a simple fact of life. You only have so much time and energy. By capping the number of directorships at 10, the code was trying to make sure that directors had the mental bandwidth to actually do their job properly for each and every company they served. It's all about focus.
Now, you might think a voluntary code would just gather dust on a shelf, right? Well, not this one. The ideas in the CII code were so powerful that they didn't stay voluntary for long. They quickly became the foundation for India's entire national system of governance.
So India ended up with this really smart two-part system. The best way to think about it is like building a house. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs, or MCA, sets the basic building code for every single company, big or small. But for the publicly listed companies, the giant skyscrapers on the stock market, you have SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India. Think of SEBI as the toughest-nails building inspector who has the power to fine you or even shut you down if you don't meet their much higher standards. And over the years, that foundation got stronger and stronger, thanks to a series of major committees. Think of these guys as the master architects who kept improving the original blueprint. The Birla Committee, for example, created something called Clause 49, which became the new gold standard by making these rules mandatory. Later on, others tackled everything from risk management to board diversity.
But here's the thing. This wasn't all just happening in an Indian bubble. To play on the world stage and attract that global money, Indian companies had to learn to speak the international language of governance. They had to line up with global ideas of what it means to be a trustworthy, transparent company.
And that global conversation really kicked into high gear with this simple but super powerful definition from the UK's Cadbury Committee back in '92. They called governance the system by which companies are directed and controlled. That one sentence set the stage for everything that was to come.
The UK really was the cradle of this whole modern governance movement. First, the Cadbury Report established why independent boards were so important. Then, the Greenberry Report went after the super controversial issue of how much directors get paid. Finally, the Hampel Report pulled all these ideas together. That framework they built became the model for governance codes all over the world, including in India.
Today, if you're looking for the global gold standard, most people will point you to the principles laid out by the OECD. Remember that building code analogy? Well, you can think of these principles as the International Building Code, the set of rules that ensures corporate structures are safe and trusted by investors everywhere on the planet.
And when you look at these 6 pillars, you can really see the whole picture. It's about creating fair markets and protecting the rights of shareholders, for sure, but it also expands that circle of responsibility. It calls for more transparency and, crucially, it puts the ultimate accountability right where it belongs, on the shoulders of the board. It's a complete system for building trust. Okay, so we've talked about the history, the rules, the global standards. But let's get down to it. Why does any of this stuff actually matter? What is the real-world value of all these codes and committees?
Well, it boils down to this. Good governance isn't just about ticking boxes. It's a massive competitive advantage. It builds trust, it makes sure someone is always accountable, it helps stop disasters before they happen, and this is the big one, it makes a company way more attractive to investors. That means they can get the money they need to grow, and they can get it more cheaply.
And the story is still being written. Today, the conversation has gotten even bigger, expanding to include ESG. Governance isn't just about the money anymore, it's about a company's responsibility to the planet and to society. It's about their environmental and social impact, too.
Which leaves us with a fascinating final thought. We're living in an age of artificial intelligence and massive climate challenges. The very idea of what makes a well-run company is changing right before our eyes. So the rules of corporate power? They're going to have to change, too. The big question is, what will that next rulebook look like? Thanks for tuning in.